We're live.
Okay. Hey, everybody. This is Miguel Barker Valdez. I'm here with our host for the Racism 101 podcast, Dr. Darron Smith. Say what's up, Darron Smith.
What's up, Darron Smith?
You always do
How's
that,
everybody
man.
doing this evening? It's a pleasure to be here
So we
with you.
apologize for the half-hour delay. The last live broadcast we did, uh, of course, Dr. Jonathan Streeter got it all set up, and he's super tech savvy. I tried to do this myself. I hit some wrong buttons, so we had to start all new. So, anyways, I hope some people are still listening to us. Our last, our first live uh, YouTube broadcast. I looked at the stats right after we stopped recording. They were around 400. Now, when I went back to the to look at it, there's over 1,000 views on YouTube, and then the podcast version, which we released on Rational Face, has over 1,500 downloads. So it's pretty good. I think this is a format that people like. So I hope people are hung around to listen. We'll see what happens. And a couple housekeeping. First of all, the 501c3 is set up. We're just waiting for my brother Paul to set up a bank account and the PayPal account so we can take what do I want to call it, Darron?
Money,
Money. Thank you. So we can take
lucre,
donation. So we can
filthy
take
lucre.
50. So we can take donations. All right. All right. All right. And then one other thing before we get into the meat of this podcast is our last one where we spoke with Ayla Stewart, the white supremacist. She brought up something called osteology. I looked into that. I contacted the medical examiner here locally. I also spoke with someone who teaches at BYU who does a lot of grave excavating, and they give me the lowdown. So I'll share that at the end of the interview. So, but Dr. Smith, why don't you introduce our guest tonight?
Um, it is a pleasure. This man is no stranger to anyone who knows him well. He's a very modest and very humble guy. So to have him on the show and do this is a pleasure indeed. I want to introduce the world to Dr. Robert Joaquin Foster, who I met several years ago when I was stomping around on the campus of BYU, and Rob was there at the time, and he and I, I was a teacher and Rob was a student then. So, as a teacher, sometimes you meet these students that just stand out, and he was one of these young men that stood out. So I want to, well, first of all, I want to say before anything, Rob, thank you for being here. Um, and we
Good to be
called
here with
him
you.
Dr. Robert Foster. And Rob actually and he and I are on a personal basis, so we won't be using formal names this evening. But Rob is actually a trained ophthalmologist or optometrician. He went to school in Pennsylvania, I think, right, Rob? In Pennsylvania or
Correct.
Philadelphia?
In Philly, in Elkins Park, actually.
In Philly. So what
Yeah.
what makes his story so interesting, listeners, is when you hear this brother's story. And I've told him this. I'm gonna tell him this again. I got him on. I'm gonna put myself on the hook on this one. I got to write this guy's story. Okay. I mean, it's just this is the kind of story that I think speaks a lot about the human spirit, stick to itiveness, work hard, work ethic. Rob embodies all of it. So it's a pleasure to have him here. And so what I want to do is before I go any further, I want him to tell you who he is, and then we'll kind of jump off and start with that. Please, Dr. Foster, please share your knowledge with us. Enlighten us, brother.
M- My knowledge, I'm not sure how much knowledge I have. Um, it's fine. Um, let's see. I'm a father of three and a half. I have a Brazilian daughter who actually lives here with me, and my wife and I have been married for about 15 years now. So that's basically me, man. I'm an eye doctor, yes, but there's things. It's not who I am. My family is really who I am. So,
You ain't gonna tell us anything else. There's got
man,
to be. There's more. There. There's a lot more to you than that. All
let
right.
us know.
So he's being modest
What do you
again,
want to know,
y'all.
Darren? What do you want to
Well,
know,
here's the
man?
thing. Here's the thing. So I wanted to get you on because you one of my heroes. Well, I don't have a whole lot of heroes, but you one of my
Sure.
heroes,
Sure.
and I like to talk to my heroes. And I, you know, Rob's claim to fame, listeners, if you're still out there, hopefully you are, is he is BYU's first African American student body president. He
Probably
reigned
only. So
only. I
hasn't
think. I mean, has there been anyone since you?
I don't
Anyone?
think there has been. So
Okay,
I
so
would
he
say
still
only.
remains. He still remains. He still holds the record for the one and the only at this point. And so, but I want to talk about that. But before we even go there, I want you to hear his story. I want you to
All
hear
right, man. So you want to
the
hear all
very
the juicy
beginning.
stuff.
Yeah, look, I
The
got it
juicy
all,
stuff.
dog. Right? You
You
don't
got it
remember?
all,
I got
dog,
it
man.
all right here.
You got it. You
And
got it all.
so, and I know we don't
All
have
right.
time to talk
So
about it all, but give us, tell us who you are, where you're from, how you grew up, all of that good stuff.
all right. Shout out to my mother who's probably listening. She's always listening. Sally Marks. Um, I was born in New Jersey, in Camden, New Jersey, which was the reason why the middle name is Joaquin. My father name was Herbert Harris. He went by Pete. Pete loved the name Joaquin, and so he named me that. My name Robert Foster is an interesting name because my mother named me after an individual she was dating, not my father's name. Um, so I go by Robert Foster, but knowing that that's just um, it's interesting to me because Foster by definition means new beginning, and I believe that my life was a new start for my family. Um, my family has had a history of things, whether it be um, individuals been killed through the Klan, or whether it be drug addiction, whether it be in poverty. Um, a lot of things has happened in the past with my family. Luckily, I was able to kind of overcome some of that, not by myself, but really with a lot of help. Um, let's see. So I was born in Camden. My mother was a single mom in Camden. She was raising me and had her own personal demons she was trying to overcome. And so she decided to send me to live with my great aunt and uncle, my uncle Felix and my aunt Cornelia. My uncle Felix was a Baptist deacon. And so they pretty much raised me from the time I was about 18 months till about 14. My last memory that I recall living in Camden was I was speaking with my father, and I have a slight stutter, and with that stutter, he always told me to think before you speak, and so that's probably been a theme of my own life since I was 5, is to always be thoughtful. Um, anyway, so I moved and I lived with my great aunt and uncle. Lived there in a small town called Warrenton until I was about 14 years old. When my great aunt passed away from lung cancer, I decided to move in with my mother. You see, my mother had married and she had overcome those demons and was doing well. And she was living in Jersey still with my younger brother. When my great aunt passed away, she decided to move to North Carolina. Uh, it was at that point that I decided to move in with my mother. Earlier in my life, she had joined the LDS Church in Jersey, and one summer I was up there visiting, as I always did in Camden every summer. Um, she wanted to sneak in to get me baptized. Well, she did. Um, back to live with my great aunt and uncle. Really not thinking about that ever. But then once my great aunt passed away and my mom moved here, she started going back to the LDS church, and then I started to go back with her. As I went back with her, they were going to ordain me a teacher, but then they felt like that they couldn't find my records, and so I was retaught by sister missionaries and baptized then when I was 14 in the LDS church, which I think for myself it was a perfect timing for me because I was ready to commit, ready to follow God's plan with whatever that actually took. So
mean, what did you think? Think that you converted at 14? You say, Rob?
At 14, yes,
14.
sir.
What did you think about the church, the missionary, the lessons, particularly when they got to the part when they got to the part about blacks not holding the priesthood? I'm not sure if that came up in the discussion, but did you hear about that before you joined?
That actually didn't come up in the talks in the discussions when I was 14. Realistically, and I haven't told this to a lot of people, but I'm gonna tell it to you now, so I guess it'll be out there. When I was 8, when my mother was trying to sneak and get me baptized, the night before I met with the missionaries, I had a dream, and in that dream, I was in this area where I felt that God was. And in that dream, I felt that I had went to an area of where He didn't want me. And in that area, He said, "Well, you're there now, so go ahead and do it." And then I woke up. And so when I asked the missionaries about that, they proceeded to tell me about the pre-existence. And as a thoughtful, I guess, 8-year-old, I thought on that concept. And so when I got back to Warrenton, I ended up asking my pastor about that, and he couldn't really answer that question for me. And so that was always a question then. And so I would say from that point on, I probably knew that the church had some, that it was true. Now that testimony grew and grew and grew as time went on, but that personal dream was really a landmark thing for me to kind of keep faith when just other things were really difficult. But
Sure.
at 14, race in the priesthood, it really never came up. Um, I was baptized because it felt right. It felt like it's something that I needed to do. I really gained my first glimpse of what I feel a testimony was after playing ball. I mean, when I was a young man, went to school, went to church, and I played hoop constantly. I mean, that was my life, was just playing basketball. And so one day,
let me interject a thought real quick.
Go ahead.
Listeners, for those who are out there
Sure.
who may not be a member of the LDS faith, Rob is referring to his conversion to the Mormon faith, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He's an LDS. He's a member of the LDS faith, and so you might be hearing this for the first time and not know what the context is. Also, he's being extremely modest about all of this, all of his history, and so I'm going to allow him to continue to go ahead. Then once he gets done, then I'm going to go ahead and give you the backstory to all this, which makes his story even more richer. Go ahead, brother.
So my first glimpse of a strong testimony came when I was probably about 15 or so. I mean, I'd been going to church for a while and had been going to seminary and all that, which is a church thing on every morning for high school teenage kids, and they had mentioned to me that I should always carry a copy of the Book of Mormon, and so I did that. It's the same way that I always carry like an extra pair of basketball shoes and an extra pair of shorts. It's just what I did. I just carried them everywhere because I never knew when like I was gonna hoop somewhere. So I remember one day I had finished playing basketball, and a friend of mine worked at KFC, and he wanted me to just kind of come and just hang out. And so I went in and I hung out. And as I was there, something told me, pick up your Book of Mormon and start reading. So I started reading, and it was at that point, that time period, that I really felt that that book was true, that book was from God. So I was in the KFC reading, and it was just an awesome experience. And so that became the secondary portion of my own personal testimony. But really, when I moved to Raleigh with my mother,
how old were you then, Rob? How old were you moved?
When I moved in with her, I was about 13 and a half. I was just about to turn 14. And
Okay.
we lived in Raleigh with my brother, who was 10. And shortly thereafter, my mother's sister passed away from HIV. And so she ended up, so her son moved in with us. And so my mother was a single mom raising myself, my brother, and also my cousin. And my mom worked, man. She worked constantly. When when I graduated from high school, she graduated from college. I mean, she was trying to do everything possible to make it for us so that we could have something. But, you know, in high school, it was just, for me, it wasn't about school. It wasn't about anything. It was just about basketball. It was about
Well, but
finding that
there's a
outlet in
reason,
my life.
but there's a reason for that. There's a reason for the basketball, right?
Oh,
There's a reason.
absolutely, absolutely.
The outlet.
There were several
Explain to listeners.
connections.
Explain to the listeners why basketball was an outlet for you.
I think basketball was an outlet for two reasons. Number one, my father played basketball, and it was an actual connection with him, and I never knew him. So I saw him twice in my life, and I knew that he loved the game of basketball. And so it was a portion of me that was attracted to basketball because of my father, which I never met, or I met him twice. The second reason behind that, I think, is that it was an outlet from the troubles of just home. I mean, there were so many things that were going on in our family, whether it be drug addiction or like abuse or whatever. And basketball was that outlet for me to just get away from it all. And after a while of doing it, I became good at it. And so, you know, it became something that I always did just because I was good at it. And plus, it was that outlet. So I think those are the main reasons why basketball was kind of a part of my life. And actually, it still is. I still coach and do some things in basketball now. But
So
was there some
so
other things that you were thinking about, Darren, that was that possibly could be reasons for my outlet of basketball?
no. I think you said it. I mean, I think you're being real modest. I mean, I've got the goods right here. I mean,
Yeah, I know
I
you
mean,
do.
I've got the rich story here, and I think what the listeners need to know is that your experience is typical of most African American young men who grow up in anywhere America, in urban centers in America, and I think that your story speaks to that, the experience of Black men, and who can relate to, you know, the troubles that you had as a youth and how you were able to overcome those troubles, um, which makes your story all the more interesting. So Rob was a big basketball star. He's being real modest. He was captain of the basketball team. He gets real nervous when I start talking about this. This goes to show you how modest this guy is. He was a big basketball star, and I know this not just because of his own lips, but because I happen to know someone who knows him personally, who went to high school during the time he went to high school at Millbrook High School in Raleigh, North Carolina, is where he went to high school at, and he was an outstanding basketball player at the time, and to such an extent to where he had scholarship offers, which eventually took him to back then it was called Rick's College, an LDS school. I'm actually an alumni from Rick's myself, so I can speak to that as well. So, but Rob ends up, first of all, he's bumping along as a youth, living with his great uncle and his great aunt, and going back and forth between his mom's place and his great aunt, trying to figure it out. And in between, he's got essentially what we would call a speech impediment or a learning disabled. I had the same thing when I was a kid too. I think I told you about that once, Rob. I stuttered like a beast at one point when I was a youth, mainly because I saw a lot of things I probably shouldn't have saw. For one thing, I think that probably stunted my language development, and I think that just my experiences growing up in the '80s as a young man, made it very difficult, I think. So I did have a speech impediment as well, so I can appreciate the struggle for that. But I'm trying to give the listeners a little bit of background so they understand that your struggle or where you are today, you really shouldn't be here. And I say that because the odds are that neither one of us should be here. So the fact that the fact that you found a way to make it is truly, is something to actually celebrate.
Absolutely. Me and my brother privately celebrated when we both turned 25. It was.
Where's your brother at anyway? I never heard you talk about your brother.
So he's in the Raleigh area. So
okay.
We actually personally celebrated them because we were 25. I mean, because at that moment, I mean, being 25 and African American, you're no longer an actual statistic. And so we celebrated when we were 30 because, we didn't want to be the 21-year-old kid who was shot somewhere.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's real, especially when when you're a kid that's born from Camden.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happens. And so we had our own personal celebration when we turned 25, and then again at 30,
Yeah.
because we were no longer in that category of looking at being shot by someone in like Camden.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
it makes me fearful, obviously, because with the things with cops and all this stuff, you still don't know. But overall, we're mostly out of that category or really
Yeah.
have to worry um, about that, which is nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, but honestly, if it wasn't for uh, good mentorship, um, I would be the same as everyone. I had friends who sold drugs. I had friends that did all types of stuff. But it was the mentorship from good people that really saved me. It wasn't me. Now I had some good qualities, yes, but I had a lot of good people around me who helped me,
Mhm.
who wanted to make me strive for better things. And that's the reason why I actually made it. Dan, because in high school, my mom did her best, but realistically, it was rule one: graduate from high school. Rule two: don't bring a girl home pregnant.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
rules. And so I did high school that way. I graduated high school with a 2.1 GPA. Because it wasn't a focus of mine. It wasn't something that I felt like I needed to actually do. I recall when BYU came and they saw me play. My actual state president, John Taggart, asked them to come out. So they came out and saw me, and I was good. But then they asked for my grades, and I was like, "What are you talking about?"
Mhm.
Because but my grades were so bad that they told me that you need to go to a junior college first, and Rick's College is the place for you. Um, and so that's the only reason why I went to Rick's. I went there because BYU told me, if you want to go to school here, you got to go there first and get your grades up.
Mhm.
You know, um, First semester there, as God would put it, I tear my ACL.
Mhm.
Right. So at that point, I'm at the lowest of my low, and I have to figure out what am I going to do with my own life. And everyone had been talking about serving a mission and all that stuff, and I wasn't sure. But I had a torn ACL, and I wasn't going to go back to school and play anytime soon. So I thought I might as well just go ahead and serve and serve. So I decided to go out and serve a mission. The best thing that I ever did, because my mission president was a business guy, and he taught me so much about what it meant to be a man in the business world, and
Where'd you
what it
serve
meant
at,
to.
Rob? Where'd you serve?
I served in I served in California, the Arcadia mission,
Okay.
which is the eastern third of LA County.
Mhm.
And it was there where I got my first experience with individuals who were not fond of the church because of the church's racist past.
Mhm.
Um, and so it was interesting. Me and my companion were praying in my first area in this park, and we hear this honk of this horn, and it's this horn of this Jeep. And this lady says, "Come here." And so, white lady, and she says, "Come here," and she points up to us, and we kind of open our eyes and look up, and okay, what do you want? And we started both walking towards her like good missionary companions, and so she points at him and says, "Not you, me. Come here." And so I come and I go over there and talk to her, and Elder Shaw is a little bit behind me, and she starts talking about how the church is racist and how could you be a missionary and all this type of stuff with this church, and and I'm like, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about, whatever, you know. And so it wasn't something that I really worried a whole lot about. Um, but then in that same area, I had several other challenges. For instance, one other which I had is that the same guy, Elder Shaw, he's from Idaho. We're riding our bikes. He's as trunky as can possibly be because he's about to go get married after his mission. And so we bike home, and we pick up mail. And so we get our mail, and there's nothing there for him. And so he's kind of bummed. And so we leave, and we go back on our bikes, and we're going to our next appointment. At that, as we're biking there, we get surrounded by 4 cop cars, right? So these cop cars surround us, and they start searching us. They throw me on the ground, and they start saying, and you know, when I'm talking to them, like, what's going on? There's like, shut up, just be quiet, lay down, and they're searching us. And I'm on the ground, and Elder Shaw is standing up, and they're talking to like Elder Shaw, and they pretty much are beating me. And so eventually the whole thing ends, and they pick me up, and they say, well, we heard there was two guys dressed as Mormon missionaries stealing mail. I guess someone had actually called
Wow.
in on us that like we were stealing mail. So
Yeah.
with like that experience and several other experiences there in the mission field, it made me think, what is going on? My mission president, I was always positive with like everything, but it's one letter to my mission president made him think. And so he ended up calling Darius Gray. And so Darius contacted me from that point on throughout my entire mission, and really helped me through and started me on the process of helping me understand what it meant to be a Black man in the LDS church, and also the history of Black men in the LDS church also. And
Tell
that
us who
was
Darius Gray is, Rob. Tell us who Darius is.
so Darius Gray. I call him one of the founding fathers, because he was one of the first Black men that I know of that is still active in the church, that was baptized pre-1978. So Darius was baptized, I believe, in 65, excuse me, into the LDS church. At that point, the LDS church did not allow people of African descent to hold the priesthood, which meant that people of African descent could not go to temples, could not be ministers in the church, and could not hold callings as a bishop or as an elders quorum president, or as a stake president. Um, they could hold callings like serving scouts, but could not hold any callings that would be associated with any leadership responsibilities. That actually changed in 1978, and so the church no longer practices that. So Darius Gray was actually one of the founders because he was one of the 3 Black men who actually went up to the LDS church and said, we have to do something about this. This was back in 1970, and the church sent 3 junior apostles to kind of help out. They were Elder Hinckley, Elder Monson, and Elder Packer. They ended up forming what is now called the Genesis Group, which was formed in 1971. The organization is still goes on. It's in Salt Lake City, Utah now, mostly.
So there's a colleague that I used to work with at BYU, who worked in the education department. Her name is Lynn Wilding. She's probably listening to us at this moment. She's no longer practicing her this faith anymore. She's doing something else, I believe. But she wanted to ask, how do you reconcile your existence in the church, knowing that before 1978, for a good 130 years, the church had such dastardly ideas about Black people and the state of Black people and the position of Black people within the church. She wanted to know, how do you do it? How do you make that work for you, knowing what you know?
I think it works the same way that I am an American. The United States of America has done some horrendous things to my people, to our people. It doesn't mean that I'm less American. The LDS Church, the Lord had to use what He had, and what He had was very imperfect men that did, in my personal opinion, did some stupid stuff, and did the best of what they possibly thought, but did some stupid stuff. And I think that Joseph Smith tried his best. I think that he had one motive. I think that Brigham Young had a different motive. And in our church, we have a tendency to follow the leader sometimes too much. And in doing so, once one person made a dumb choice, it kept following. Do I reconcile it? No, I call it what it is. I call it racism. Same way that I call it racism in other faiths also. You cannot find a Christian faith in the world that does not have a racist past. You cannot find it. You know, the AME church was founded because they were dragging slaves away from the altar. I mean, that's why the AME church was founded. Blacks got tired and they got sick and tired of not being able to actually pray, so they formed their own churches. So this racist past has been going out through every church. Now granted, the LDS church is the one church that claims to be the only true church. It doesn't mean that the people are by any ways perfect. The people are very flawed, and that's okay, because the Israelites were also flawed, although they were the Lord's chosen people. Now, I do believe that the Israelites looked more of the complexion as I am, and less like which is depicted in like other pictures. So, but
So you're saying that they were black?
I am saying that they were people of darker pigmentation, absolutely. And I am also saying that honestly, the Book of Mormon mentions that in the latter days that the Gentiles would bring the gospel to the Israelites. That's clear in there, and many people skip over that, but it's very clear in there. I do look at the Gentiles bringing the gospel to the Israelites coming to pass now. Sometimes people look over that and think it's something different, but I think you know what I'm saying there.
Mm-hmm. Miguel, he's a resident scriptorian. Do you have a comment on that? You usually got something to say about these scriptorial related questions. Any comments or follow up?
No, I agree with I mean, you know, I agree with him that they were browner, right? they weren't blue-eyed, but I mean that's what happens. I mean, you know, Christianity starts there and it spreads out and becomes, you know, Roman, and then it spreads out and it becomes whiter and whiter. And so yeah, they would, you know, but who knows what they really, I mean, the honest truth is who knows what Israelites looked like, you know, but they wouldn't be blue-eyed and blonde-headed. That's for sure.
Well, I don't know if listeners, if you're hearing at this, I don't know. I don't want you to go and, you know, put sackcloth and ashes and weep and wail because you're hearing this stuff. You might sound like heresy. Just the thought of not having a blue-eyed, you know, blonde-haired Jesus is just a novel idea for just unbelievable, troubling idea for most whites. So. What I hear you saying, Rob, is, and this is one of the reasons why I like you so much and I appreciate you so much, is that you call a spade a spade. So you're not going to apologize for the church. You're going to say exactly what it is that you see, and that's exactly what it is. It's racism. So, you know, deal with it.
Absolutely. And when I go to speak with Heavenly Father, and hopefully, you know, we just celebrated Easter, and we all believe that Christ was resurrected, and therefore we also can be resurrected. And my plan is, when I am resurrected, to be the one that Heavenly Father looks at and says, "Well, you couldn't take it, huh?" You know, I mean, I am going to make sure that I live up to the covenants which I've made, because I believe that those covenants are true and that they're from God. And so I don't let other people's faults dictate what I do personally in my own life. I can't. There's too many people that are doing too many other things. I have to be responsible for me and not really for anyone else's faults.
Do you ever feel a sense of pressure to somehow, usually the term model minority is used when speaking of people who are Asian, but do you feel a pressure at all to be the model minority as a black man in the LDS church?
You know, that's a good question, and the answer to that is no. I feel the need to be who I am, and that's it. I mean, that's all. You know, I am sentenced, if you will, to serve in the stake presidency in my area, and I don't find that to be something that is necessarily where I have to be one way just because I'm a black man. I just be who I am, and you take it or you leave it. You know, I try not to be anything else but who I am and what I want to be. And so there isn't a pressure to be elitist or better than or to be the model African American. I try to speak what I feel, and if you like it, great. If you don't, great. I mean, that's absolutely fine with me. We are all licensed to our own opinions, beliefs. Um, you know, so that's fine. That's fine. No, I don't see myself needing to be that model individual. But I also know that I'm representing more than just myself. I'm representing my family, representing those who put faith and trust in me. So I'm not representing other African Americans. I don't see that. I just see myself as representing myself and my mother and my wife and my children. And I want to make sure that they have the best um, representative around them. I want to make sure that my daughters hopefully will marry someone who's like me. And that's the reason why I try to do that. And I want to make sure that my son, so I try to be the best that I can be around them and around others, so that if someone else sees me, that I'm the same person at all times.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. May I ask you another question?
hey, yeah,
So, my wife and I watch the sitcom Blackish a lot because the show is freaking brilliant.
absolutely brilliant. I
It's
love it.
gotten
It's one of my
better.
favorite shows.
The writing has gotten much better. When it first started, it was garbage, but it's gotten much better over
Oh
time.
my gosh, it's so good.
Darren, I've liked it from day one. It's a black show on TV. That's not so
It's gotten
I
better.
love it.
Content's gotten much better.
The content is better. Yes.
So, you know, the dad, Dre,
Yeah.
the entire family's well-to-do. He married
Yeah.
a woman who has a white father, black mother, and she's an anesthesiologist. You know, so the whole
Yeah.
family's well-to-do. But but Dre constantly, you can see he has this constant conflict that he's, you know, he came from a, you know, a very urban area, right? Now he lives
Yes.
in this very white suburb, but you always get the sense that there's always this fight in him between like his blackness. He doesn't want to sell out, I guess would be the word. But at the same time, realizing that he has all this, he's worked for what he's had, and he's given his kids things that he didn't have. And so, do you ever, Michael, do you ever get that sense that there's like these two sides that you're dealing with, given your upbringing, you know, growing up in a more urban area of the country, and then like somehow you're losing your blackness, if you will?
Um. Well, there's a couple differences between Dre and myself. I think the first aspect of it is being Mormon. You get a realization of that soon, especially as a black Mormon. You really start to think about that and ponder that. Um, you know, I don't see myself as losing any blackness whatsoever. Just because I'm dark as night, number one, so that's not going anywhere. And no, number two, um, you know, I try to stay culturally involved. I try to stay involved with the people that I love, with my people, and with everyone else, if at all possible. So no, I don't see myself losing any blackness, if you will. I think I'm the same type of person that I was when I was in high school. You know, the difference is that there are so many ways to be black. Um, when I was at Rick's College, I had friends of mine that were trying to be black. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
they were white and they were black. And there were some that were white and there were some that were black. But I grew up in an area that was predominantly black. I mean, I there was Jason and there was April. Those are the two white folks in my class, right? So I didn't have to try to be black. I just had to be me. And I'm the same way now. I don't have to try, and that's the pleasure of growing up in a predominantly black neighborhood. You realize that there's all types of ways of being black. There's no one way. There is no stereotype because everyone's so different. And so right now we're the same way. Luckily, my kids live we're okay, right? But we live in a neighborhood where we have 3 white families, but they're $400,000 homes, right? That's it. So my kids are growing up in the same. The only experience switch they have with when it comes to a predominantly white environment is at church, right? Everywhere else, they are the majority, whether it be at school or whether it be on their basketball team or whether it be wherever. The only place they are the minority is at church. And so my daughter actually feels that at times. She feels that, hey, there's not that many other black folks here, right? But in our ward, it's not that bad. We actually have several black families. But luckily, I grew up in an area where I didn't have to prove that I was black. So still, as an adult man, I don't feel like I have to prove that. And I don't feel like I'm losing any type of blackness, because I stay connected as much as I can. And you know what? Basketball helps me stay connected, because as I coach girls, as I meet with their fathers and their parents, I stay connected to the African American community, constantly.
Listeners, if you're out there, Rob grew up his formative years from 18 months to around 14. Rob, is that right? When you
About
left,
14 with my great aunt and uncle. Yep.
he grew up in a little place called Warrington, North Carolina. It was established in 1779. Between 1840 and 1860, Warrington was the wealthiest town in the whole state of North Carolina. Its
Slavery ended.
main crops were tobacco and cotton. Today, the Census Bureau has it at 862 people. Most of them are all black. So I can't imagine when you were there what the numbers were then. So it's a pretty much a black town that was established because of slavery, during
It
slavery.
is a completely black and Native American town, and it was established because of slavery. And once slavery ended, the wealth went away. The white people moved away, or they moved to a place called Norlina, where they lived. And it's the same way now. Most of the white people live in Norlina, and the black folks live everywhere else. And it's it's an interesting place.
Is it
Extremely
country?
poor.
Is it country out there? You said it was country.
Country as you can possibly get. Yep. For those people who think that I have a country accent, I have no country accent comparatively to Warrington folks. So
Did you have a dirt floor? I'm just curious. A dirt floor.
no, I did not have a dirt floor. You see, my great uncle was very good about saving money, and so he lived in Jersey until he was about 60, and then he moved to Warrington. He bought his house on his father's land, so he bought and built it. He spent 10 years building his own house and paid for it cash. And so when he came home to retire, he had his home there. And so we had everything that we could possibly need. However, if you go down the dirt road to my cousin's house, they had no running water, and this is back in 1990. They had an outhouse, a whole bit, so it wasn't
Had an
like,
outhouse in 1990s there?
oh yes sir,
Oh Lord.
yes sir. So that's just the way growing up in Warrington was. It was a
Right.
very poor town. It still is a very poor town.
Sure.
Um,
It must have been culture shock when you went to Raleigh.
Rick's College.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
yeah,
there we went to
Raleigh
Raleigh
was
for
the
the first
biggest culture
time.
shock. Absolutely, because I went from living in Warrington, where it was almost all black, to Raleigh, where it was probably about 20% or maybe 25% black. And in school, all the white kids had these BMWs and these nice cars, and it was really racially divided, even though you had so many blacks there. Also, you had people at that point too. You had individuals that were doing the same thing. People were trying to live up to this stereotype of being black. And me, I was always the same dude. I was always just trying to be Rob, because again, I grew up in an environment where there were so many different kinds of us, so many different colors, so many different thoughts and processes to that small town. So coming to Raleigh, I didn't have a need to try to be black. I had, like I said, I had buddies who sold drugs, and they sold drugs only because they thought they wanted to be like the other cool guys.
Yeah.
And I never really had that desire. I always knew who I was.
Yeah.
My mother, who was a member of the in the past, excuse me, the Nation of Islam always taught us that we were kings, and so it was to act as such. So I never had
This
an
is your
actual.
mom, Sally. This is your mom, Sally Marks, right?
It's my mother, yeah,
Okay.
Sally Marks.
Okay.
So I never had an actual desire to act any other way, but then an actual king. So I didn't want to do any of those crazy things. I just didn't have that desire in me, and the church helped obviously with that. But personally, I just didn't have that in me.
That's super interesting. What you, for a couple of reasons, what you said is how sometimes we want to act out in what we see as stereotypical ways of a certain race, and it seems to be white people trying to act black. It's usually they'll dress a certain way, or they'll try to talk a certain way, and they just you just kind of look at them. What are you doing? And my mother's Guatemalan, my dad's white, and so as I've kind of tried to grasp my Latino-ness again, initially I started doing it in stereotypical ways. I wear a flannel, sometimes button up on the neck. I'm 43, dude. Then like wearing a flat brimmed hat, and as I've spoken to people, especially Misha, she's pointing out, that's what you do at the beginning. And one of the things is, as I was having this conversation, once again, talk about Blackish. I mean, we watched this episode where Rainbow is having this crisis of identity. Is she white or is she black? And there's a piece in there where she's in college and she decides that she's going to try to be black. So she dresses, she's very embarrassed about the way she dresses and how she's acting. All her black friends kind of look at her and like, what are you doing, man?
That's right. He got knocked out.
You there?
Hello, Darren, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here.
I guess he got knocked out.
Who, me did? I got
I'm not
knocked
sure
out?
what happened. No, he did.
Okay, Miguel. Okay, Rob.
Miguel,
now tell us. Now, obviously, you went to Rick's. You were playing basketball. How did you get to the point to? Because as I read through some of your history, man, there was a lot of you were a shy cat, man. You were kind of shy with the ladies and stuff like that. With prom and stuff. I remember with prom, you didn't go to prom. Some confidence issues, even though you were a hell of a basketball player. So
well, yeah, I was the
where
captain
did
of
all
the
this
basketball
start,
team.
the confidence stuff happen?
Well, I was the captain of the basketball team, and I was shy, yes, but I didn't want to go because I didn't trust the girls. I mean, to be honest with you, there were, when I was there as a freshman and a sophomore, I was not popular, if you will, because I was just doing my own thing, trying to figure stuff out. And then as a junior, I burst on the scene as a starter on the basketball team, and all these people started to like me. And so at that point, I'm like, well, if I didn't know you earlier, I don't know you now. And so I didn't want to delve in that. So I had someone ask me to prom that wouldn't talk to me earlier, but now I want a basketball team. She want to talk to me. So I wasn't interested in doing that, So when I got to college, everyone kind of wants to explore in college. And so in college, I dated a lot more. I went out a lot more, but I think in high school, it was more about girls in the church were like sisters, and they were I just couldn't do that. But then girls at school was there. It felt like that somebody always wanted something from me. And so because of that, I didn't feel comfortable in dating them because I didn't want to, do that with them. So,
well,
but as far as confidence, I think confidence came from knocking on people's doors every day and getting rejected every day. I think after a period of time, you get to the point where you don't have any fears of that, of like rejection. You just become confident in just who you are. Now, maybe some people don't get that, but I personally did, especially as a person who stuttered and really had a difficult time expressing vocally what I felt. I thought that the mission really helped me with that. It helped me to be confident in my own speaking and just who I was. I was always confident, but it was a silent confidence, and everyone knew that, hey, you don't mess with Rob, but it wasn't something that was outward. It wasn't verbal, and it became more verbal after I ended up serving my 2-year mission.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So fast forward to BYU and the run for student body president. How did that all transpire?
Well, realistically, it started after I got back to Ricks College. When I got back to Ricks from serving a mission, my Moses Diaz, if Moses is listening, shout out to Moses,
Brother Diaz.
brother Diaz, Moises. Um, Moses asked me to join the Black Student Union at Ricks College, and I said, "Why?" um, and he said that there was people that was struggling with their blackness, and I said, "All right, well, I'm game then. Let's go and do it," because I was busy. I was on the basketball team. I was doing things, and I was just really busy. And so I joined it, and I loved it. I love the environment. I love the camaraderie. And so when I was there, we had service projects. We served. We did some wonderful things there at the school. And so the following year, I ended up giving up my basketball scholarship because I got a different scholarship, and things weren't really working out basketball wise anyway. Um, and then I became the president of the Black Student Union there. Then I also did a lot of service projects there and became the man of the year at Ricks College, which they don't do that anymore, but I had it then. Um,
Mm.
and then when I was there, I got this phone call from Regina Saunders, and Regina had heard about me there, and she asked if I would come to BYU, and if I came, if I would run for vice president of the Black Student Union. And I said, I don't go to school there yet. How do I do that? And she said, well, don't worry about it. We'll just get it set up. So she had told me that this girl, Alicia Pixton, Alicia Pixton Chang now, if she's listening, was going to be the president or going to run for a president, and then that they were asking me to run for vice president. And so I did a phone interview with the BSU while I was at Ricks, and I got the job there as the vice president at the BYU Provo BSU. So went there to BYU and was serving there with Alicia and loved it. Also did some things on campus there. I was in charge of BYU's homecoming dances, and with those dances, we had lots of success. We actually produced a ton of revenue for the school, and so from that, the person who was running for president for that year, his name was Matt Blackner. Matt asked me to be one of his vice presidents, and I said, "Well, yeah, I'll just interview for that." And so I did it and got it. And from that point on, the very next year, I was planning on running for election. There was a guy there who I thought I would run with, and then he told me that he wasn't going to run, but then he ended up running against me. So I chose someone else as my partner, someone who had also went to Ricks College also, and so someone that also did like EFY, and so she was fairly known. And so we ran for office, and our theme was the Marvin Gaye song "What's Going On." We just wanted to have these students informed about the administration, about what was happening there with them, and to try to make change on our campus, and it worked. I mean, it worked. Our whole concept worked. The people loved it. It really helped actually being African American, because no matter where I went, I was advertising our campaign. It's this guy on our campaign team. His name was Pete On, and Pete had this idea of like putting our posters on everything. Is to and so in doing that, it worked, because in class, people would stop class and say, "Hey, you're running for office. You want to talk to the classroom?" This happened over and over and over, and so people knew me. And of course, with the EFY kids, which I knew, and and the Ricks College transfers, we just got a lot of votes, and we just won. And it was a blessing and a cursing at the same time. I learned a lot there. I learned a lot about leadership. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about how the church works also. and I learned that sometimes people can abuse power. But I also learned that there are a lot of caring and giving people in the church and also throughout the whole world. So it was a wonderful time serving. Interesting enough, though, is that when I served, the first it became public that I was, the first African American president there, or student body president at BYU, and I got all these letters. I got letters from the KKK. I got letters from racist people who were upset. They were mad that I was elected student body president. All this other stuff. I got
Tell us what they
hate mail
said. Tell us what they said. I'm
just,
curious what they said.
all types of crazy that they just wanted to
Uh,
intimidate me, and were kind of mad that I was elected. A student body president of a predominantly white institution. I mean, African Americans on campus are 0.04% on campus. That's really about 600 students, and so it was a miracle which I was elected. But that was a milestone.
yeah.
One of the most blessings, or the biggest blessings that I had was I had a chance to actually speak at devotional.
Mm-hmm.
And that was awesome because I had a person. It was a young man who called me, and I guess he was having a hard time with his stutter, and his mom saw the whole devotional, and he saw it, and he said, "Mom, he stutters," and that day I was just as smooth as possible, but he could pick it up, and so they called me, and he was having a hard time going to his lessons, and getting his therapy, or like whatever, and I actually helped him to want to go back and actually get his lessons, and that was a blessing for me. um, I think it was a kid who was like in Iowa somewhere. But it was just a wonderful blessing just to have that. And then also we were able to do some really good things there to really support the student body and make BYU a better place. I think when I was there at BYU, it was it was like the renaissance for African Americans there. We created and did so many wonderful things with the leadership that were there. You were there. Obviously, you got Regina, Alicia,
What about Kevin?
Tamu, Landy.
Wasn't Kevin there in the dance department? I think Kevin was there. Am I
Yeah,
mistaken?
Kevin was there. We had so much talent that was there on campus, and we made it happen. And the thing about it is that we knew who we were, and we didn't have to try to prove it to anybody. I think a lot of kids now feel like that they have to prove that they're black, or prove that they're Mormon. And you don't have to do either. You just be who you are, and people either accept you or they don't. And so, but anyway, that was a wonderful time, a wonderful experience. It laid the foundation for me becoming an eye doctor. And
Tell us
right
about that. How?
wonderful thing right now. I graduated high school with a 2.1 GPA, but that didn't stick. Went to Ricks College, and after my mission, ended up graduating from Ricks College with about a 3.7 GPA. Graduated from BYU with a 3.6, and so I was good there. Went to optometry school afterwards in Philly. Graduated with honors there. But worked here in the Raleigh area for I guess about 2 years. Then started my own company. Right now I have 4 practices here in the area, and we just make it happen. We're just trying to grow it and see patients on a regular basis, and also try to serve in what other ways possible. So
Tell us about Jay Leno. What happened with Jay Leno when he called you?
Yeah. Tell us about Jay Leno. Make us sound really
honestly,
cool.
Yeah.
Make it sound really cool. It really wasn't a big deal. So in 2002, obviously it was the Olympics there, right? I was elected, and so I was a big story there. And so we had phone calls from Channel 4 News there in Salt Lake, from everyone, right? And Leno gets this call, and they call the administration, and they invite me over. So the administration calls me, and we talk in this conference, and my partner in that, my vice president and I are just there, and we're like, Leno, we're not ready for Leno. So we're just like, we're not gonna do Leno because we had just been elected. I mean, it had been maybe a week out, and they were talking about going on Leno. I mean, we had already been on. Is it KSL, which is Channel 4? Is that right? Is that KSL?
I'm not sure. What is it? You know what is Miguel?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I'm sure.
Yeah, I've never lived in Utah. I have no idea, man.
So we were in this interview with like KSL. They invite us over, and so it's early morning too. And you know, I'm a college student. We don't get up early in college. It's about 7. It's about 5 in the morning, and so they invite us over, and we're in this green room hanging out, eating donuts and whatever. And then they tell you, hey, you're gonna be on in about 2 minutes, so you got to come out. And so I've come out, wiping off the crusties, and so we're live in 30 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And so they start, doing the whole prep for it. And then the first questions was like, well, tell me about blacks in the priesthood. Like, what are you talking about? I am not the voice of all black people in the world. I am not.
Man.
So,
what happened to the election? What happened to the election result?
What happened to the election after everything that, I'm a college student. What's up? Why are you asking me about that right now? So, and it was interesting because even though I was elected student body president, that was always a theme. That was always something that was in the back of my head constantly. And so that was the reason why I started the project called the 11th Hour Laborers. And I started that right after I was finished working as the student body president. And I was working on it. We were raising funds. We were trying to get things right for it. And the 11th Hour Laborers was a project of where we were trying to get the voices of all the African Americans who was baptized pre-1978 and get their testimonies recorded. I had, as a member of as the student body president at BYU, and I guess at that time as a prominent African American, the church had asked me to be a part of their public affairs committee in Salt Lake, and so I did that. And I had given them the idea of doing this, and they said no, and so I said, well, it needs to be done, and so I'm gonna do it. And so that's just me. If I feel it needs to be done, I just go and try and do it. And so I tried to actually do it. And we were raising funds forward, and we were hitting brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. Margaret Young came on board, and she helped me reach out to a guy named Richard Dutcher. Richard helped us out some, and then Richard kind of fell off the project too. It came at a crossroads where I needed to make a choice. Either I work on this documentary or I go and be a doctor. And so I prayed about it, and I said, I need to go and provide for my family. And so I decided to leave the project. Margaret asked if she could keep it going. And so I said, yes, if you can get Darius Gray on it. And so she was able to. Darius Gray got on the project, and they finished it up. It's now called Black the Untold Story, excuse me, of Black Mormons.
Oh,
so nobody knows. It's nobody knows the untold story of Black Mormons. So
that's the backstory.
That's the backstory. We actually, I probably recorded about 45 or 50% of it. With Richard Dutcher, Margaret, and actually Darius finish it up with Dana Gerald, and they finished it up and got it produced and all that stuff, which is wonderful. If you look at the credits, I'm actually there at the credits with another guy who actually helped me start it too. So. It was a wonderful project. I just had to go and make way for my own family. I had to leave Utah and do some other stuff. So
I can't
leave it up to somebody else.
Yeah, I can't. This is really cool, man. That that DVD, my family, we own the DVD. That is like super important to us. I mean, like I remember, I think what happened was I first caught it on, it wasn't the History Channel. It was like a
PBS.
documentary channel. I can't remember. It wasn't PBS even. It was like one tier lower than that. I can't remember what it was. So then I went online and I found it and I bought it and I watched it and I'm like, this is good because it's kind of telling it straight as it is. And at the time I was the young men's president in my ward, and I thought these boys need to know about this history, right? They need to hear about it from us at church. So
Absolutely.
I ran it by my bishop. He goes, "Let me watch the DVD." He watched. He's like, "Yeah, totally, dude. We'll do this." And so we watched it in the preschool. And for those that are in LDS, that's 16 to 18-year-old boys. We watched it. And we broke it up, I think, into 3 Sundays. And at the end, we always left like 5 minutes where they could ask us questions. And I lent that DVD out to one of the anesthesiologists that I work with. He's watched it with his family for family home evening. So I got to tell you, thanks, brother. That was very important in my faith journey.
Well, I didn't finish it. I just started it, and I started only because it needed to be told. The people that have went through so much more than I ever could. I'm not sure if I could have been some of those individuals in that documentary, just because they went through so much in order to be a part of the gospel. I just can't imagine being Jane Manning James and doing what she did and being constantly denied by the first presidency. I think that would be very, very difficult. But she was able to overcome it and do what she had to.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. I just remembered when the church released the essay on race and priesthood, my
right.
bishop decided that he was going to use that as the platform he was going to use that for, how sometimes we do a 5th Sunday lesson if we have an extra
Yeah,
Sunday.
absolutely.
So he was going to approach it, and your DVD was also used. And I'll never forget, there's this sweet woman in our ward. She's dead now. She was pretty old, so she's in her 80s. And older people tend to think they're whispering, but they're not.
Oh, yeah.
So she goes, so we're talking about Elijah Abels, and she goes, I had no idea a black man held the priesthood during Joseph Smith's life, and so it was such a game shifter for so many people in my ward. And I live in Oregon, and Oregon's is predominantly white, and I live in the southern part of Oregon, which is really white. And so and so it's what you started has been put to good use here in Southern Oregon, brother.
Oh, good to hear that. A lot of people helped out with that project, so I was blessed to have the opportunity to start it and just to get it going. But a lot of people really had their fingerprints on that. So, but thank you for that.
Rob, tell us who one of the famous black people you encountered when you were at BYU. Her first name starts with an M.
Margaret Young isn't black, dude.
Margaret Young. He's talking about Mia Love.
Okay.
Tell us your Mia Love story, Rob.
There's not a whole lot to tell. We came across paths a little bit. She was not in tune. She's the same way she is now, the same way she was there. She was not very in tune with any part of being black at all. Wonderful person, wants to serve, wants to love people, wants to share things with the people. But as far as having that connection, I feel as though personally that she just lets it go in order to be LDS, and I don't see that as being necessary. But some people feel like they have to put down their race or who they grew up as in order to be a member of the church. And I personally think that actually brings our church diversity and culture. If we were all the same, it would not really bring anything to the church. And so I tell folks who are baptized all the time, bring what you have to us, bring your culture, bring everything you have to the church and make us better, because it's only with having that diversity that makes us better. For us to be a one type of person, everyone to be a Peter priesthood, it's not really effective for our church. We need to be a diverse people, and because that's the only way we are going to attract other people. That's why the lady last time that you interviewed, I think she bugged me so much, is because she's promoting the opposite of that, and I think that will hinder our church in the long run. But yeah, Mia Love is I mean, cool peeps. I mean, I have nothing but respect for her. She has overcome so much and does so many great things, and I'm hoping that she will continue to do great things. I do not ever plan to go into politics, and I cannot imagine the pressures from the left or right side that will make you say and do so many things. But you know, I prefer to be a man as I stand.
Well,
That's a mean, man.
I was going to say I don't know if I necessarily second the motion that she's done great things. Depends on who you ask, what party you belong to. Because from where I'm sitting, she ain't done a whole lot.
Well,
but at any rate, that's another story.
And I'm saying great things, Darren, because getting elected itself is a very difficult thing. So just
I can imagine.
But as far as her politics, I can't say that I'm
a fan
too much.
Well, I won't say any more about that. I just want to make that observation. It's not about her tonight anyway. It's about you.
Hey,
yeah, please go ahead.
Can I read something? We got a comment here.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you ready, Rob, for this one? See if this rings a bell. It's from William Silverman. He says, "Hey, Rob, great to see you talking to Rational Face. Great to hear you addressing important issues on race. It's been a while. I met you at Rick's. You would have known me as Bill." And then he writes again, "I was at BYU when you ran for student body president. I remember we used to chat it up all the time." So,
yep, cool.
That's cool. And then another guy here. Another guy here, Spencer Lake. "While today's church disavows past racist teachings, forgotten are dissidents like Dr. Lowry Nelson and Stuart Udall were right, while the apostles were wrong about doctrines taught pre-1978. So,
well, I'm not sure, and that's one thing I wouldn't go with right or wrong. What I would go with having the full knowledge about it. You know, the blessing of the church is that you are entitled to revelation. You really are. But the Lord has given certain people priesthood keys, and the church functions with those keys. Now, you might have a revelation personally that you might understand something to be true, but if the person with the keys doesn't get that, then it doesn't spread throughout the whole church, right? And so you have to rely on those keys, on that line of authority. So even though someone else might be correct, if they don't have the keys, it really, unfortunately, it doesn't matter until the person who has the keys receives that. And the question could be, how come they aren't getting it? Probably because they're not ready yet. And when they're ready, the Lord will give it to them so that they can use it. But I personally think that a lot of brethren at the time just weren't quite ready yet. When the Lord saw that they were ready, He gave it to him.
You know, Spencer Lake has a follow-up question for you, but I think last month I finished up Dr. Paul Reeves' book, Religion of a Different Color, and he makes the argument that one of the reasons that we ended up there with the priesthood and temple ban was because the church was being, and its members were painted as being not white, and so they struggled to be white, and eventually they got to that point where they were accepted as being white. And then as the world kind of moved on beyond that, the church was still stuck in like this, this early 20th century view of what it meant to be white. And it took us a while to catch up with that.
Okay. I'm not sure if I get that. I think the church was trying to be accepted, yes, by like regular Christendom. However, the church will never be accepted by regular Christendom. And I hope we could kind of get over that at some point, but I'm not sure if we ever will.
Yeah, it'd be
regular
nice.
Christian church will not accept Mormons. They will more likely accept Muslims before they accept Mormons, in my personal opinion.
That's interesting.
You know, it's that Bible, that Mormon Bible. I tell you, that it gets them every time.
Well,
So
it's the prophet Joseph Smith, and there are other aspects of it too. But I think that we need to identify with who we are and be proud of it and move on with it. I think so many of us are we're just not fully aware of who we are, and sometimes are slightly ashamed of being Mormon.
yeah,
Not that we don't have a testimony of it, but just we don't want to. That's why we struggle so much as a church with a missionary work. Not because we don't have missionaries going out, but because individually, each individual person doesn't go out there and say, "Hey, did you know that I'm Mormon? That this is what I actually believe." That we don't invite people into our conversations. We would rather just be a good person, and someone will one day recognize that, "Hey, he's a good person. What does he do?" No, if we were more outward as individuals, the church would grow leaps and bounds. But we struggle with that because we're not all comfortable in our testimony of that yet.
Well, if listeners, if anybody's on listening to us, and you have anything to do with calling Rob to go to Salt Lake City to work, now's your opportunity. He's available. He's
not
successful. Has
available.
4 buy him out. He can go and do his thing in Salt Lake. It's about time. We love Africans, but we want some African Americans up in there too.
Hey, got another question here for you. Do you want to take it, Rob?
Hey, man, sure.
Where's it at? Where you see it?
Yeah, it's right above when you wrote any questions for Dr. Foster, right above that.
It says, oh yeah, I see it.
Spencer Lake.
It says, Spencer Lake has a question for you. He says, my question is, why do you think today's apostles should be trusted today as right, for example, with their exclusion policy regarding same-sex couples, when history shows how wrong they can be? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely heard it. First of all, I don't like comparing African American struggles to same-sex struggles. There is no comparison there, and I hope individuals stop using that as a comparison. I love my people who are attracted to the same gender. There are other comparisons, other struggles you can actually compare with. I would really hope that people would not use that same comparison. It is a little different. Is a lot different actually. But as far as being wrong, the Lord teaches us that the church is true. This is in Doctrine and Covenants section 1, verse 30, that he's proud of the church collectively, but not individually, right? Individuals are going to have a hard time accepting things, and it may take time for that. I'm okay with being patient with that. I'm okay with letting people grow individually. I'm okay with seeing someone that may have a hard time with whatever it is and not being able to understand it. I have other sins that I'm personally trying to overcome. Now as an organization, could we make that change? Probably so. Is it time for it? I'm not sure of that yet. I'm not sure. Will it ever come? That I'm not sure of either. I know that the Lord loves us. He loves all of his children. He wants all of his children to be happy and find happiness. I think that for us, it's important for us to be patient, to not look at someone else's sin or someone else's, and I'm not speaking of homosexuality as a sin. I'm just talking about someone else's flaws. To look at someone else's flaws and say, well, because I don't have your flaws, I'm better. Because I don't have your flaws. We all have them, right? And the church, it has some, and one is probably that issue that the church will have to work through with time. I don't think it's going to happen right now, and I really doubt it's going to happen with more people pushing. With the blacks and the priesthood issue, as I go back and I say don't like compare it, I am going to now. With the black issue, the brethren had consensus to actually make a change to that in the 1950s. They had political pressure to actually do that in the 50s and also early 60s. They had a vote to actually do it, as the apostles did, right? They had everyone except for one person vote on it. He was out of town, but he happened to be the president of the quorum of the 12 apostles. A, right? And so 20 years for everything to actually change, right? So am I sure, do I know when things with same-sex marriage and all that stuff is going to change in the church? I don't. And do I hope that it does? I hope that people find happiness with who they are and not have to depend on any organization to define their own personal happiness, whether it be our church or something else.
Sounds good. Yeah, you know, when you're talking about how Spencer Lake and I are friends, so so I can pick on him a little bit. um, you know, that what tends to happen with Mormons, and I'm not saying that Spencer was doing this necessarily, but I've seen this happen, is that many times the only time that Mormons will bring up racism within the church is when they're talking about homosexuality. So it's almost like racism is something other people do, not me. And the only time I'm going to talk about it is to show how the church was racist and how they're treating, you know, people from the LGBTQ community.
We lost Miguel again.
Miguel, where'd you
Miguel,
go, dude?
Gotta get that fixed, man.
He
That's a good
keeps
point.
on. He does. He does. Man, listen, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I think we've been going for a good 2 hours now, if I'm not mistaken.
We start at 9:30, man. So we could end this whenever you need to.
I mean, I don't want. I know you have to
I
see
gotta.
patients in the morning.
Well, tomorrow is Thursday, so I play basketball every Tuesday, Thursday morning at 5 a.m. So I get up at
Okay.
4:30. I go and excuse me, shoot some hoop, try to be athletic, but I'm just a fat old man now, so it's hard to get out there.
How your knees holding up?
The knees are struggling, man. But you know, I get out there because I have a family history of uh, of being big and fat, and
Hmm.
also family history of diabetes and all that. So I'm trying to curb that if I can. So I try to get out
Okay.
there and be active. But
And health is okay right now? Your health is okay?
health is good right now.
Good,
No
good.
no hypertension is there's no diabetes, and for a black man who's over 40, all that's really important.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Um,
You look
but
good, brother. You
you
look
know,
good. You look extremely
thank you, sir.
well. Doing
Thank you,
well.
sir. It's wonderful to Miguel. I'm sorry, man. You got cut out again.
Yeah,
You gonna,
there's a problem. It dropped off, so I can ramble on again if you want, or I'll shut up. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me.
I was just telling
it's
him
all good.
I don't want to take up too much of his time. I think, I think we've pretty much got, what we need to get. I don't know if Miguel, you want to add something, unless Rob, you want to add something. But now I know that right now you are currently a second counselor in the state presidency where you serve, right? Where you live.
That is correct. Yep,
Okay.
that's correct.
So he's very busy, listeners, between his four practices, his conglomerate capitalist enterprise he's currently involved in, and then he's very much involved in a full time job with the church, even though he says it's not a full time, but
It's not a
I
full
know
time
it's full
job.
time.
But
He's
then
very busy.
I also help run an AAU basketball program, a young lady
Yes.
AAU basketball program. I have my daughter who's from Brazil living here with me, and so she's doing well. We have a young lady from our program who is going to be going to BYU next year to play basketball. So you got to look out for her,
Oh,
Maria.
she's going to go? She decided to go to BYU?
Maria's going to BYU. She'll
That's
probably be
awesome.
a point guard there next year.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if she starts there next year, but she should get a lot of playing time next year.
Sweet. That's awesome. Good.
But yeah, our program there is going well, and so yes, we are busy in the foster household,
Yeah.
and
Oh, definitely.
I don't know it
Definitely.
any other way. I think my wife thinks that I'm crazy because I'm so busy doing so many things all the time. So, um, but it is a blessing to serve and to be of service and to help out people in whatever way possible. I like to give people the opportunities that I didn't have. People when I was in college, people used to talk about affirmative action and how it was such a bad thing. And that's going to BYU, which a predominantly Republican area, And I used to say that, well, I'm a product of that. And they always just say, no, Rob, you're just different. And I used to think that is the most
Mm,
racist thing you could tell me, is that I'm
mm,
different. I'm not.
mhm,
I was given the opportunity, where so many of my brothers and sisters were not given the opportunity. And if you're given the opportunity, you'll be surprised what can come out of that seed if that opportunity is given. So many stereotypes are out there, and so many of young children are not given the opportunity needed. And because of that, they get stuck in trying to live this stereotype, or trying to live something that they think they should be. I was watching Good Times with my family yesterday, and we were watching the second episode of it, first season, and it's the episode on Black Jesus, and JJ makes this painting, and then he also makes this painting of Jesus, right, which is also black, and in this episode, JJ related more to that pimp, right, because that's what he saw every day, and he thought that
Mhm.
that if he was a hustler, then that was a good thing. And so that's what he thought was a great painting, you know. Um, but his brother thought that the painting of Black Jesus was actually good. So it's interesting how if we don't get the opportunity, we can just fall right back into those stereotypes, excuse me, and those stereotypes, especially for African Americans, can really hurt us. It must be really difficult to be Asian and be stereotypical smart. I mean, I have a buddy of mine who is Asian and finds it difficult to live up to that expectation. And
Mhm.
sorry, but it must be rough to have folks think that you're smart all the time.
Mhm.
you know, with like me, we have to prove it every day. I have to prove it every day in my doctor's office that I know what I'm doing,
Mhm.
that I'm a smart doctor, that I can service you well. Because all of my practices are in a predominantly white area. You know, and if I can't relate to all people, then I won't have an actual business there.
Mhm.
You were gonna say, Miguel? You gonna say something? I
Well,
thought.
what you were saying, well, first of all, you're talking about was it Good Times you watched?
Good times last night.
Okay, Good Times. All right. So, shows like that, and show like the movie The Butler did a pretty good job of this, is
Yeah,
when it's about a black family, not someone looking at a black family, but about a black family, you get to see the diversity of ideas and opinions, and so you realize that being black, as you've talked about earlier today, isn't some monolithic experience, right? Um,
exactly.
and then the other thing you made me think about was actually white privilege, and because your children now, right? They have privilege that you didn't have. Agreed or
Absolutely.
okay?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So what now do you do with that privilege, and what do your children do with that privilege? It can be a good teaching tool of what white people, and I include myself in that category, what white people should be doing with their privilege. It's not like your kid's fault that somehow they're well off, right? Like they didn't do anything wrong, right? But it's all dependent upon what happens with that privilege that they have. How do they use it? How do they, lever it, if you will? And it's the same thing with white folks, right? In the U.S., right? They have certain privileges, so nothing's wrong with being white. Nothing's wrong necessarily with being privileged. But how are you going to use that privilege? Are you going to use it so you constantly stay on top, which means people have to stay under you, or are you going to use that privilege to bring people up?
Mhm.
Absolutely. You have to use it in order to serve. If you're not using it to serve, then what are you really doing? That's really what it all boils down to. I try to teach my children to serve every day. In the morning, when we have prayer, the first thing after that we talk about is, who are you going to go out and serve? Because that's really what it's all about. If you have an opportunity to be of service, then you need to do that at all times. It's I think it gets tiring for my kids at times, but we try to serve as many people in our family as at all possible. We've had people live here with us that probably shouldn't have. We've taken care of
Mhm.
people here and there. it's because we have the opportunity to do so. You know, my great aunt did it by giving people meals. You know, when people were like hungry, they would come around and she would always have food ready so that there was someone who needed something, she could give it. You know, it's those small acts of service that really make us who we are. And that's what we're all trying to do, right? We're all trying to become like Christ, and those small acts of service helps us to become like He is.
Beautiful, man.
Hold on one second. I think we may have another question here
What's up?
for you.
Oh,
Your
Janan.
your fans want to hear from you.
Janan.
Is it from
Janan, what's
Janan?
up? You know,
Is it Janan? Who is it?
Janan is good. Janan is good people.
Yeah, Janan.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's good people, man.
yeah. Do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
Go ahead.
Dr. Smith.
Go ahead. Go ahead and fire away.
So Janan writes, but there are Black people who are in same-sex marriages. I think there is overlap, but unfortunately, conversations about sexual orientation in the church tends to center white Mormons. Oh, that's why is she so smart, man? She's yeah. So I'm not sure if you want to respond to that or just have us read it.
I don't think it's a question. It was just a statement, right?
Yeah, it's just a statement. Yeah, she's freaking brilliant.
Here's
I mean, I don't.
I'm sorry, Rob. I don't want to. Janan, we're not trying to blow you off with. Let me go to this. Unless you want to come back to that question, Rob, and answer her question, or at least try to find a question in a comment. But if not, I will go to the next question. The next question is this, and this is a decent one. It says, how do you keep yourself grounded and anchored in the church, given the alt-right, white conservative nature of the church? You know, particularly where you are in North Carolina.
Well,
you know, how do you find yourself grounded in that?
Well, please stop calling it alt-right. Call it what it is.
What is
like we
it?
said earlier, we call spade a spade. It's white supremacy, right?
Okay.
And so I don't call it that. I call it what it is. And so how I do that is that first of all, I'm present. I'm at church. See me, and if they see me, they will get to hear me. You know, one of the difficult things that I have at times is that no matter where I am in my church building, I am in charge. That's difficult at times because I have to preside and I have to be there with that. Um, and so a long time ago, I decided that I was going to come to church, not for the church to serve me, but for me to serve it. And so when I go to a sacrament meeting, it's the same thought process that I have with my kids in the morning when we have prayer. When we have prayer, excuse me. When I come to church, who am I going to serve? Who am I going to help? And so with that, I realize that there's people in my church, in my own ward, that I need to help understand that Black people are not that way. Now, I'm not going to outwardly do that and take that person to the side and have this conversation with them because I don't feel I need to at times. I'm going to represent what Blackness is. I'm going to represent that to them at all times and be unapologetic on that. You know, there's no reason for me to do anything different. I am a proud African American man. I love my heritage, and that's just the way it is. I'll give you a great example of it. Now, this is not an opportunity that everyone gets, but I have the pleasure at times and the displeasure of speaking at state conference. And so I spoke at state conference. And in the talk I was talking about genealogy, and I was talking about someone in my family who was hung by the Klan, and that's a part of my genealogy. And so I talked about that, and I talked about the importance of finding out about this man, and finding out about his family, and about how that built my testimony, and how that actually helped me to gain a greater understanding of what the people at that time had to go through. You know, people talk about Joseph Smith marrying girls that were 14 years old and 15 years old. Well, my great-great-grandmother married a person at 14. Why? Because her father was killed by the KKK. Her mother went crazy, and went into a home in Raleigh. She was in Warrenton with her brother and a sister, and had nowhere to like turn to. So she ended up marrying my uncle Willie, or my grandfather Willie Joyner, right? She married him because there was no other choice for a black woman at that time, right? And so she got married. And so that helped me personally understanding. It helps me to understand who I am, where I came from, and what they had to go through in order to make it. And so, given that story about my genealogy, I'm not preaching to anyone about being a black, but I'm letting them know, I'm giving them a little bit of what the black experience is all about, just by being myself and by being present, right? So I think by being present is one of the most important things, is by being there and not holding back when it comes to something you want to share. Interesting thing on that story is that after I shared that, the mission president came up to me and he said, I hate it. He said, sometimes I hate being white. He said, sometimes I just hate I hate what my people did to yours. And I said, President, it's not about you hate being white. It's not about what your people did to mine. It's about us understanding each other, right? Because my talk was not about that. It was about going out and doing your family history and finding out who your people are. It just so happens that I have a very interesting family history, and every African American does. And it talks about the history of the country if we do it. And if we share that, people, it will open up people's eyes so much. But we have to be present in order to share that with people. We can't be absent. We can't be mad at whatever and not be there. We have to be able to vocalize that.
Rob, let me ask you this. This gentleman has a follow-up question. He wanted to know. This is Spencer Lake. He was saying that I'm not trying to. He says, to be clear, I wasn't trying to say that there's the same, the same-sex marriage question that was asked earlier, nor de-emphasize one over the other. So that the black issue. So he's saying what I'm trying to talk about is faith and trust. How do you trust in these apostles when you know that they've been infallible? They've said things that were not true, and they've deceived and led people astray all these years. So how do you deal with that? How do you make sense of that?
Christ did the same thing. He that without sin cast the first stone, didn't he? And so I don't see the prophets and apostles as being infallible. I've never seen them as such. I see the only perfect person to be perfect was Jesus Christ. So I think that they are going to make mistakes, and I think we're going to have to accept that people make mistakes. There's nothing wrong with that. I think, and I might be racist in saying this, but the gentleman who probably asked that question is probably white. Is he? I'm not sure if he
I'm not sure, but I would guess. In fact, he didn't say, and he said fallible, not infallible, but fallible, not infallible.
They're fallible. They're fallible. They're not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to create policies. They're going to do things that are not going to be perfect. The only perfect being was Jesus Christ. Peter, for one example, how many times did Jesus Christ himself tell him, and did he have to have a vision and a different apostle to go out and preach to the Gentiles? I mean, so many times. We are not dealing with people that are by any ways perfect. These are fallible people that have their biases. They have so many things that are wrong with them personally. And the Lord is trying to work through an imperfect vessel. You can't expect an imperfect vessel to bring perfect things, but the Lord will make up the difference in the long run. Which is why I have confidence that whatever feelings we have about same-sex marriage in the church, and whatever struggles that people are actually having, the Lord will make up the difference in the end. Keep the faith, be present, and voice your opinion, and love people unconditionally. Show people what it means to love, and in doing that, you will find that attitudes change, and people will actually love back.
What the question that I think Janan has one more question, if I'm not mistaken, if this is Janan's question. She's asking, yes, what advice would you have for Black Mormons who are struggling in the church? What advice would you give them?
I would say the first thing you got to do is go partake of sacrament. I think that's the first thing. Remember the covenants which you've made with the church, number one, and with Heavenly Father. That's the first thing. The second thing is understand yourself. There's a terminology that used to be used in the 90s is understanding self. Understand your own personal Blackness and how that and being a member of the church does not conflict. In my mind, it enhances it. Me being African American or Black in the LDS Church, it enhances my stance in the church. You know, I do feel and believe strongly that my people were saved for the latter days to be a part of the coming of the kingdom of God on the earth. I want to be a part of that. I really do. And it's not just a want to, is I feel it in my soul that I need to. You know, and unfortunately I haven't come to the point in my ministry where I feel like if you don't feel this the same way that I'm going to try to actually convince you. I don't. If you want to come, come. But I know that it's the right place for all of us to be, no matter how racist and how ignorant people can be to you and to others. It's important for us to first of all be present. And once you're present, you'll understand where your place is. Your place is the place of everyone else's as a child of God, as someone that's been ordained as a priest or a priestess to be one, to rise in the resurrection, to be like our Savior. So we have eternal blessings that I don't feel like we should let those go. There are things that are culturally different in our church. The only way that those things that are culturally different, that the only way that those things can change is that if we're a part of the conversation. We cannot be a part of the conversation if we're not in the doors. It's not going to happen. There's conversations that I have as a member of the stake presidency that I could not have if I was not an active member of the church right now. Just wouldn't happen. And because I know who I am and I understand who I am, those conversations can happen. An example is today I was talking to a different stake presidency, and we were talking about the Genesis group. They had no idea what that was about, right? We formed a group in the area called Friends of African American Saints, and they're not sure what to do with it, right? So because they respect of who I am, because I've been there, they asked me, how can we help in this process? Now they have a full understanding of what they can do in order to help African Americans. Now, will they do it perfectly? Probably not, but they're able to gain that understanding because I'm present. If I'm not present, if I'm not actively engaged, then the trust is never built. And you can all tell that I'm not someone that's going to hold back. I'm going to let them know the right things.
Mm-hmm.
So all that's important. So I would say be there, because no matter how ignorant someone treats you, there are things that you have to offer, things you have to share that is going to be for the betterment of the kingdom of God. So help in that whole process.
Okay. Appreciate that, man. Appreciate your comments. Appreciate your time, your example. Taking time out of your busy day to answer questions and to tell us about your experiences. We really appreciate that. I'm definitely going to write your story up. I'm going to get to that. The billion things I have to get to, but it's definitely on my list.
Well, Darron, some of the things I didn't want to mention tonight because I think some of those things we can put in a book. Some of those things I don't put on live. things just because, I told my mother that a lot of the dark things in our family, that we would let
Respect,
those
brother.
dark things go, and
It's
we
not.
would
It's not. It's not
write
worth
a
it.
book. It's not worth it, right?
Yes, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I totally get that. So I was gonna.
Yeah.
So that's why tonight I was gonna let you, tell us what you want to tell us, what you think we should know about you, because
Yeah.
I mean, and I appreciate you. So remember that day we talked about this? I think we were on the phone for like an hour, several hours talking about this, like 3 hours talking, like going over this. This is like 40 pages, man, of
Yeah, I
your
know.
stuff.
I know.
So much richness there, but I want to tell you this anyway. Just I know it's late there where you are, but thank you for your time, brother, and for your example, for the good things you do. So keep it up.
Thank you,
Yeah.
sir. Hopefully,
Yeah.
everyone out there who's listening can do in their heart what they feel is right. And being a member of the church is not easy. It is a challenge, but I think it's a challenge worth having. I don't think the Lord wanted to make it easy for all of us, but just keep the faith and keep on moving in a positive direction. So.
Yeah. Hey, I'm so glad I got to meet you, man. This is good.
Same
Appreciate
here.
that, brother.
Same here.
All right.
Did I fade out there, or am I still
No,
there?
you
So you're
sound
good. You're coming good. Coming across real well, loud and clear. So thank you, Jay Leno. We got him. You didn't.
Sucker!
So,
What is that? 20 years later?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
So hey,
It's 17
better than
years.
nothing, man.
2002 to now, 15 years later.
It's all right.
It's,
Thank you.
it's crazy.
Thank you very much for your time, Rob. I really appreciate it, bro.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Anytime, Darren.
All
all
right.
right.
So,
Okay.
were there any more questions? We good?
No,
I think we got everything. So
Yeah, Darren and I are just going to talk about osteology. So if you want to hang out, you can. Don't feel bad if you want to hang up on us.
Osteology, huh?
Yeah.
From that young lady who's having a
yes,
hard
yes,
time
that
figuring out
flew
who
the other night. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. I decided to look at it and figure out what it actually is.
And I actually feel bad about talking about the girl because she's not here to defend herself. But the thing is that some of her stuff are just indefensible. It's just some of it is so ridiculous and so 19th century racism. We deserve to have this little conversation because I posted something about her today online and it's blowing up. People have a real tough time with her. So please tell us what you've learned about osteology.
All right. So osteology actually is something totally legitimate. So
okay,
that first off, there is something called it's the study of human bones, and so I have a friend who used to do detective work for the state of Oregon. So he spoke to a medical examiner for me because I was wondering, can you actually tell someone's race based on skull structure specifically? I asked, and the medical examiner said yes. So I'll stop that. I wasn't able to speak with him myself, so I wasn't able to delve into any more detail regarding that. But I did receive a message from a professor of biology at BYU, and as part of his job, he does excavating of burial sites. And so his response was interesting, and then he spoke to me for about 15 minutes on the phone. So let me pull up what he wrote, and then I'll kind of give some a little bit more detail into what he told me, because as human beings I think we're just wired to have easy answers. So it's either like with her, osteology explains all of this, and then for me I'm like osteology even really thing.
Well, and the thing is too, when some of the stuff that she's talking about, like physical anthropology and some of the things she's talking about does exist, but she's misapplying it. She's misapplying the information, and she's not looking at the information for what it's actually worth and for what the discipline actually. First of all, listeners, let's be clear. Ayla is not a trained anthropologist or a trained forensic scientist whatsoever. So what she's getting and what she's gleaning is from stuff that she's read, or the sites that she quotes and the things that she goes with are things that I wouldn't consider peer-reviewed material whatsoever. So I'm real skeptical about the stuff that she's brought up, because as I've read through some of her material, some of her ideas on this, it's all 19th century racist, pseudoscientific racist stuff. And yes, there is some science about ancestry in terms of haplogroups and looking at ancestry, and that certain so-called racial groups have typical structures that are unique to that particular group. They do have that, but it's not mapped in terms of race. There's no mapping of race, because race is a social construct.
Let me read what he said here. And he didn't want me to give his name or anything like that, but
Coward.
Well,
No,
he doesn't want to get hit. He doesn't want to get flooded with a bunch of
I'm sure he doesn't.
right-wing nut jobs. Okay, so this is what he wrote. In general, though, you have it right. Bones are bones. Nothing about a leg bone is going to tell you anything about race, which is essentially a social construct, which is what you said right there. That said, Africans tend to have larger nasal cavities than Northern Europeans. Head shape can be deliberately manipulated while a child is young, and some groups have done so. I'm thinking specifically of the Flathead Indians, he put that in quotes, whose skulls are decidedly flat on the back as a result of manipulation when they are babies. And you saw that with my ancestors, like the Mayans, they would do the same thing. I've contacted, excuse me, can't, okay. This is more that sorry, I got to edit out some of the stuff so I don't say his name. The range of variation in cranial features makes individual identifications only a likelihood and not a diagnostic. Right. I'm not aware of literature on lower extremities containing any geographic population characteristics. Then I sent him the article that I was talking about at the end of the last podcast from University of Western Ontario. The article from the University of Western Ontario starts by pointing out that really important fact that, quote, race, close quote, is a continuum, and that most anthropologists don't accept the concept of race anymore. I like the point that hold on, I just lost my spot. Hang on. I like the point that early explorers didn't talk about race because they traveled slowly to see the full spectrum of gradual change. That said, there are indeed differences if you take a representative sampling of non-hybrid individuals from different parts of the world. But Frank Boas pointed out that, quote, homogeneous populations do not exist anywhere in the world, close quote. It is interesting, though, that there are differences in parts of the world. If the point of the alt-right woman was to claim that race means completely different human population to the point of different species, she is totally off. And then he says QAAPA, that must be the American Academy of, I'm not sure what that is. Physical anthropology, I don't know. Pure races in the sense of genetically homogeneous populations do not exist in the human species today, nor is there any evidence that they have ever existed in the past, close quote. If she's simply recognizing differences that have evolved over time in different places, then yes, there are some. That much is obvious. If you just look at two people side by side, and the author of this article acknowledges the same, but society still perceives human genetic diversity in terms of discrete racial groups. And then he writes, the conclusion is useful from the article I sent him. All living members of a single species, Homo sapiens, there is a great deal of genetic diversity with all human populations, and human genetic variation should be perceived as a continuum rather than a discrete category. Now I'll tell you what I learned from my conversation with him. So first of all, using bones, like he said in this thing, is not diagnostic. It can it's what's the word he used? It's descriptive, but it's not diagnostic.
Right.
First of all, the other thing is, just like, you know, when you do your mouth, I haven't done this. You do your mouth swab, you send it in, and it shows you where your DNA came from.
Yeah.
Well, what he explains there is that doesn't mean that is where the highest concentration of that specific DNA is found.
Right.
So if you have,
genetic drift.
Yeah.
So basically, your cells and your genes aggregate in certain populations because that's where your ancestors went out of Africa, how they came out of Africa.
Yeah, yes. So you'll find that, and the same thing with certain skull features, and he was very specific about like the cribriform plate and all that stuff, right? Where those features tend to be concentrated in certain areas. That doesn't mean that those didn't exist somewhere else, right?
Right.
It just means that's where the highest concentration was. And so it's only descriptive. It can never be diagnostic. And so then I asked him about, I work in orthopedics. So I said, what about the axillary skeleton? He goes, most of the stuff that study is with, with the cranium. But he says, if there are some differences if you, if you're digging up a burial site in Asia, you expect to find Asians tend to be shorter, right? It's, you know what I mean? And so he was explaining they're working on a burial site right now where most of the people there are redheaded, redhead, blonde hair, and then all of a sudden they found a skeleton that had dark curly hair. So they're like, oh, what's going on here? What, let's look at this. What can this possibly tell us about this person, And once again, it's not diagnostic. It's descriptive, and it's not 100%. It just gives you an idea, a framework that you can work in. So it'd be. Go ahead. Well,
I was going to say that, and I think the situation with her is that the information that you're putting forward, she tries to essentialize that information and make it a biological essence, right? This is how. There is an African race, there is a white race, etc. That's all Linnaeus stuff. That's all early 18th century Carl Linnaeus stuff, right? So that has nothing. And of course, Carl Linnaeus's work has been largely debunked, and we know this because of the DNA, the Human Genome Project. We know that all of that stuff that existed prior to that, all that racist social science, and most white anthropologists and other white social scientists produced in the 18th, 19th century, right, has all been debunked, right? In fact, you and I are more like than Rob and I, and that has to do with polymorphisms, right? So groups have specific polymorphisms that develop over time, and that could be skull, it could be cranium-related anomalies that exist within a particular region. You mentioned frequencies of a particular genetic anomaly. That has to do with polymorphisms and differences in the way that humans evolve and populations evolve over time. So what she's talking about is some old 19th century eugenics bullshit that doesn't even exist in the real world.
Yeah,
and that's the danger of her. The danger of her rhetoric is that she's propagating racist pseudoscience of the 19th century that is now suddenly back in vogue again because this idiot that y'all, not you, but white folks voted for, he's in the White House now, and so it's fashionable to bring this kind of shit back into the public domain.
Yeah, and
but Americans have to be much more savvy about this, Miguel.
Yeah,
be much more savvy about it.
And he even used the word eugenics. He said when I first started speaking with him, he goes, actually, you have to figure out when you're saying race, what do you actually mean? Which, of course, I try to tag her down to explain to me what it means to be white. Right? She could never tag it down. So you have to ask what do you mean by race, and why do you feel the need to categorize people in race? Which for her, she's wanting to use these categories and then use osteology to where she was trying to go with it, and we kept her from doing that. Is like, because actually she did slip something in, right? She said, white people are more suited for certain types of work. Black people are more suited for other types of work. And then she went to
singers and athletes. Singers and athletes.
Yeah. So then she went to osteology, right? And so what she was essentially saying is, based on these bone structures, it tells us something essential about these different races is the problem. So if a skull of someone has sub-Saharan African blood is shaped this way, well, their frontal lobe might be different, so might be more easy to incite to anger and violence. That's where it goes, right? And so you and I stop. We're like, you're crazy. Yeah. And so the other interesting thing he said to me is, he said there's actually more variation in bone structure between races than there are intra-race.
I just said that.
Yeah.
I just said that there's more. I have more in common with a white person than I would with Rob because of the whole process of polymorphisms,
Yeah.
and so in other words, genetically, so the small amount of DNA, or the small amount of genetic variation that you see, right, physically see in human beings is less than 1%. And
It's
those
super
differences
small.
are striking. They're striking differences between Rob, myself, between you, and other people around the world. And we fixate on that less than 1%. We
Yep.
like it means something. Like this
Yep.
this fool, and I keep calling her a fool. So that's what she is. You damn fool for spreading these stupid rumors around. And Americans aren't that bright to begin with. Okay, so all you got to do is add this extra stupidity, right? And along with someone who has racist inclinations, and all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of people who believe in fake news, right? Just
Yeah,
like this idiot here that's propagating. So I have a real issue with what she talked about because it's so dangerous.
Yeah.
What
No,
she's
it is.
saying.
Yeah, it is.
I have a friend. I won't tell you who he is, but he serves in the church, in a position in the church, high-ranking position in the church, and he actually told me that if she were in his area, they'd have some words to say to her about what she's doing, because what she's doing is spreading false doctrine, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
Word. Yeah.
what you think, Rob, about her?
We would call that apostasy.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apostasy is going against the teachings of the church and spreading propaganda that is false.
Yeah.
So that would be called apostasy. So yes, there would probably be individuals that will look at talking with her. Living in a small area in Utah is less likely for that to happen, because people will probably just not really bother. But if it was happening in a more diverse area, she would probably be talked to by someone about that.
I like how calm and collected you are.
Oh man, dude.
Dr. Smith's so animated, and you're like,
that girl gets me so riled up because she's. At any rate, Rob, I have one more question to ask you.
Yeah.
He says this is a mutual friend of ours. He says Rob used to refer to himself as a middle passage Black American, and now I'm happy to hear that now he embraces his African roots. He said, "What's changed?" He says now he refers to himself as African American. So that's what this person wants to know.
He's misinterpreted the understanding of that, I think. So
Okay.
middle passage is where so many of us came from, right? And I'm not exactly sure. I think that my people came from a portion of Western Africa, but I'm not exactly sure exactly where, right? And so because of that, I used to use the terminology Middle Passage America, because so many of us came from all parts of Africa, were sent there first, and then divvied out throughout the entire Western world, whether it be America or whether it be Haiti or whether it be, and so by saying, or whether it be Brazil. So when I say I'm a Middle Passage American, what that means to me was that I'm related to all those people, all those Black folks and our cousins. We're all related, right? And so yes, I'm an African American, but I still relate to what would be a Middle Passage American, and that would not only mean people that live in America, but in the USA, excuse me, but that would also mean individuals that live in Haiti and like Brazil, South America. I mean, and in all those areas, we're all related because of that. And so that's the only reason for middle passage American. I'm sorry that he took that way, but yeah, I've always been appreciative of my African side, if you will, although I don't know a whole lot about Africa.
Yeah. Word up.
I actually, my friend Landy Boca, she would tell me all the time, "You don't know anything about Africa," because she is African. She was born and raised in Canada, and she would tell me often that there are differences between Africans and African Americans. So.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Brother, thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
I got one more thing on the on the osteology.
Oh yeah, please go ahead, Miguel. Sorry, bro.
So I asked him specifically about that journal article that I looked up to try to better understand it. He explained that article was more of a review of what has been accumulated over time. It was the person that had printed it had done very little new research themselves. Then I asked him specifically about the categories, the race categories in there called Mongoloid, Caucasoid, and Negroid, because they sounded pretty bad to me.
19th century, man.
Yeah, he goes.
I've heard that stuff before.
Yeah, so he says that's sometimes used, but the other way that they'll use it is they'll say sub-Saharan African for Negroid, and then for the Mongoloid they'll say a high plain Asiatic is the other way that's used. But he does say that within the literature that sometimes those three race categories are sometimes still used in the academic literature, but there's other ways that people will refer to it as well. But yeah, so it was I'm glad he responded to me, and I'm glad he let me tell the audience what an academic actually.
Well, these are
research.
I was going to say these are some fantastic books on the topic. This is I did my dissertation. I wrote about this.
Okay.
These are great books on this topic. Okay, on the topic of what Ayla was discussing, some of the stupid pseudoscience of the 19th century that she continues to lie and beguile people. This is a great book by Anne Morning. Anne Morning talks about, in this particular book, it's called The Nature of Race. What she's arguing is that how do different disciplines talk about race?
Oh, that's interesting.
How does anthropology talk about race? How does psychology talk about? Are they still using pseudoscientific concepts? And Anne Morning is arguing that yes, it's not uniform across the board. Some disciplines are still using outdated racial science as part of their understanding of difference. Anthropology used to be one of them, but they've since changed that. And so if she claims that she's a physical anthropologist, which she's not because she's not trained to be one, she may have maybe taking some undergraduate classes, then she would know that the preamble of the organization that governs that particular discipline has fully debunked, biological scientific notions of racism. So please, Miguel, I'm sorry to cut you off, bro.
No, you're cool. No, we're good. So that's all. I thought it was, like I said, because I work on bones. That when she said that, that's what I was like. What the are you freaking talking about, man? So yeah. All right, brother. I got nothing. I got nothing else.
Man. The girl has got some. I don't know if she's trying to make a name for herself or she's trying to get out there, but she's quite dangerous. I mean, the stuff that she's putting out there is really, really dangerous.
And I'm gonna quote Rob here in his voice, and where we live, that would be called apostasy. I loved it, man. Very calm. Yeah. So we're gonna have to do something.
I don't think I've ever seen Rob get upset or animated at all. I think I've ever seen it.
Only on the basketball court.
Yeah.
Yeah, the patience of Job, my brother. Patience of Job.
Word.
So,
well,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, brother. I'm going to take us out, and then we're call it quits, man.
Yep, sounds good.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Well, you too.
Thank you.
Thanks, listeners, for hanging on with us. I hope you enjoyed listening to Dr. Robert Foster's story. It was super interesting. I had actually Dr. Smith introduced me to his story like a week ago. I had never learned about it, so that's why for most of this I just had my mic on mute and just listening. So it was good. I'm glad you two are friends, and that I'm glad Dr. Foster, you decided to come out and hang with us on Rational Face. This is important work I think that we're doing. And so this is Wednesday night. I'll try to see if I can get this on podcast form tomorrow so we can get it out. And it might take me a little bit longer than that. It might not happen until next week. But thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for the questions that were sent in. And once again, pretty soon we'll be able to take donations through our 501c3. And that's it. Peace, love. Thanks, you all.
See you guys. Take care. Good night.
Good night.